All right. Thank you for joining us today to talk about an exciting new funding opportunity for employers in the machine, tool, die, mold, and automation industry. My name is Sarah Hickson, Program Coordinator at MentorWorks, and I'm joined today by Rob Cattle, Executive Director, Canadian Tooling and Machining Association. For the webinar today, we have intentionally turned off the audio controls for participants, and we'll only be fielding questions via the questions box in your webinar toolbox there. Feel free to put your questions in there as we go, and Jamie from our office has kindly offered to help to provide answers on the fly as we go through this webinar today. If there's any questions that we don't get to or Jamie's not able to answer throughout the webinar today, there will be an email going out tomorrow to all participants with some follow-up information. So if your answer or your question doesn't get answered prior to that, feel free to reply to that email, and someone will be in touch with you as soon as possible. At this point, I want to pass the mic off to Rob to quickly talk about the CTMA.
Yes, welcome to today's webinar. It's our pleasure to work with our member company, MentorWorks, on this new exciting program. A little bit about the CTMA. The CTMA was established in 1963 and has approximately 160 members. We have chapters in Windsor, Western Ontario, and the Toronto GTA area. You can read some of our statements there, but among many of the initiatives that the CTMA promotes, and we try to promote and provide programs devoted to apprenticeship training and skills upgrading for the machine, tool, die, and mold sector. We believe that it's very important to promote the awareness of opportunities available to young Canadians who select this industry as their vocation and to advance their careers. The Career Ready program is one example of this type of initiative that the CTMA looks forward to bringing for you.
So here is Rob's contact information. If you want to get a hold of him, if you're interested in becoming a member, if you are not already a member of the CTMA, he's the one you would get in touch with. If you don't feel like you have to scramble to write this down, as there will be follow-up information in the email we provide you after the webinar, so there you go. But this just gives you an idea of where to find them. www.ctma.com is their website if you want to find more information. So now for the main event. In partnership with the province of Ontario, CTMA is administering the Career Ready with CTMA program to support employers to hire and train students, recent graduates, and new apprentices in the automotive sector, and more specifically the machine, tool, die, and mold industries. So Career Ready with CTMA. So this program, this slide gives you sort of a high-level overview of the program, what the objective is, what the eligibility requirements are, how much money you can get per placement, certain things like, what can a CTMA member do versus a non-CTMA member in this program, as well as what our timeline is for the program. So again, we talk about 50% of revenues derived from the automotive sector. That's a big piece. However, more specifically, we want to focus on companies within that machine, tool, die, mold, automation, fabrication type industries. And that's where this program is going. The other requirement is for non-CTMA members that they must have less than 1,000 employees. You can see that we're launching this next week, which is really exciting. So it's going to go live on July 15th, which is Monday. And the funds will be available on first come, first served basis. And we'll get into a little bit more detail in the next slide. So what we all want to know about is what are the dollars and cents, right? So here we go, funding contribution. The program offers up to $3,000 per hire for most new recruits. So There is also the option, or there's funding available for candidates who have a self-disclosed disability. So that funding bucket is a little bit larger, up to $5,000 per hire. And if we want to get into more detail about what that looks like, we can have that discussion offline. The nice part about this program, so you may think, 4 months hire, $3,000 isn't going to go very far, that's fine. But you know what? Because now we're offering these consecutive placements. So you can apply for up to 3 consecutive placements for a hire, as long as the funding and the timelines make sense. So if there's funding still in the bucket, Rob will let you know, and we can go from there. There's a maximum of 8 candidates per employer, whether you're a CTMA member or a non-member company. And so that's something to keep in mind as well. The 3 consecutive placements does not affect how many candidates you can have. That's a completely separate piece to the puzzle. So in addition to this, we're encouraging employers to consider stacking the CTMA Career Ready funding with other government incentives that are out there right now to optimize that wage subsidy that you're eligible for.
And that is why we felt it was very important to partner with MentorWorks, because they have a lot of expertise in this area, and we want to see if we can get as much funding for our members as possible.
Yeah, one of the things we probably should have mentioned is who we are, and we may as well do that now. So MentorWorks, we're a privately held firm based out of Guelph, Ontario, and we've been in the government funding space for about a decade now. And we specialize in helping companies like yourselves to optimize your government funding opportunities. So I forgot to add a slide for that. Okay, so when we talk about stacking funding, there's a lot of confusion around stacking funding. A lot of people think it's double dipping, etc. But as long as you're getting your funding from different sources, it's not necessarily considered double dipping. So when we talk about stacking, this program in particular comes from a pot of provincial money. So when we look at stacking, we want to make sure that we're accessing money from different types of governments. So in this case, we wouldn't want to stack any other provincial funding on here because that would not be okay. We would want to look at incentives from whether it's the federal government or any other programs that might be available to look at how we can add to that bucket of funding that you're accessing. So in this case, we talk about $3,000 per placement. But in addition to that, we have funding available through various programs for co-op students. So when I say co-op, it doesn't necessarily have to be an accredited co-op program. We're talking summer students, we're talking internships, things like that, but they have to be registered in school. And so we can access between $8,000 up to $12,000 for eligible candidates for that demographic. In terms of recent graduates, the CTMA program requires your graduates to be 0 to 18 months out of school. But some of the federal programs have different, criteria there. So where we can, we want to also be able to stack with that federal funding. And for recent grads, we can offer between $15,000 to $18,000 of stacking. Apprentices. So when we talk about apprentices, these are new to your company. So all of these categories cannot be previously employed by you. They have to be net new hires. So these up to 100% of the candidate's wage can be offset through different sources. You're probably aware of the tax incentives for the apprenticeship programs, and that's what this number here would be representing. So you probably already are accessing these, but they are available for you.
I just wanted to mention that, as Sarah mentioned, this is for a new apprentice only, and so it's a little bit difficult to hire a new apprentice on day one. It's one of the problems or some of the discussion points that we've had with MTCU, But if you have any questions on this, please get in touch with me about new apprentices, and we can go from there.
So when we talk about who as an employer is eligible for the program, I kind of touched on it at a high level before, but you must be operating in Ontario, meaning you must have a presence here, an office space, etc. You must operate within the machine, tool, die, mold, automation, and or fabrication industry. For non-CTMA members, you must maintain fewer than 1,000 employees on payroll. And, and 50% of your revenue should come from the automotive manufacturing sector.
And this, remember, this is a very broad-based sector, and it contains several tiers, as we all know. So we are trying to focus, the actual machine, tool, die builders, and focus on that tier. So it's pretty open as far as if you're worried about that eligibility criteria, give me a call. Let's discuss it.
So there may be some questions about what it costs to access this program, and lucky for you, there's no application fee. So you don't have to pay to access it. However, it is crucial to keep in mind that because there are limited number of placements available, preference will be given to CTMA member companies. Non-CTMA member companies may or must meet certain program criteria that we've touched on already. But just keep that in mind as we move through this process. So for the actual candidate, so when we say candidate, I'm talking about your student, your apprentice, or your recent grad that you're thinking about bringing on board. There's particular criteria there as well. So must be, again, a new apprentice, new student, currently enrolled in an Ontario diploma or degree program, or a recent graduate, less than 18 months out of school. They must have attended an Ontario institution at some point. And they must be an Ontario resident that is legally entitled to work in Canada. So for a number of the federal hiring programs, there's a minimum requirement of your candidate having permanent residency and that they attended a Canadian institution. This program is a little bit more specific on the Ontario institution being required. However, they're a little bit more open in terms of the requirement to be a permanent resident or citizen. So here, as long as they have the paperwork or a work permit or whatever it is that they need to be legal to work here, they're eligible as an Ontario resident. International students are absolutely eligible for placement funding. So to qualify for funding, these candidates and the roles must be full-time, so minimum of 30 hours a week and at least 10 to 16 weeks in duration. They should begin on or before February 7th, and this number just lets us, it just sort of works backwards from the drop-dead date of the program as it stands currently. We do not know if this funding will be continued into the future at this point. This is sort of a pilot at this point, so we're working off that knowledge right now that the program will end sort of in April 2020. The candidates must be paid at least $14 an hour for the duration of the program, and they must not begin at your company until the agreement has been signed by both parties, yourself and the approval committee. So as we work through this process, I wanted to just give you a visual representation of what the flow looks like. So MentorWorks, we mentioned, we're helping to write the applications for employers, and so that really alleviates a lot of the burden of the paperwork from you. There will be a little involvement required, a little back and forth necessary, but what we typically like to do with all of our hiring programs is we want you to identify your candidate first, and send us, at this point what we would suggest is that you send us a copy of their job description and their resume, and we would basically immediately be able to pre-screen them for their eligibility. If they're not eligible, we'll save you a lot of time up front by saying, you know what, this does not fit. If they do fit, then we would say, great, let's move forward, let's apply for funding. At this point, we'd also scan for additional federal incentives that you may be interested in stacking. And then from there, we would look at applying, completing those applications, as well as you would engage with your employee. Once they've signed on, you'd want to stagger the start date by about 2 working weeks or 10 business days, just to make sure that your approval is obtained before they start. Again, this is a really, really strong sticking point for all government funding programs. So if they start on payroll before, you cannot access funds. You will be declined. So again, we sign the contribution agreement after you get approval, and then they start working for you. So all of what I just said relies on you having a candidate in mind. Should you not have a candidate in mind going into this process, that's absolutely fine. You can still reach out to us through that contact form mentioned. However, Rob here has been doing a lot of great work on the side to identify potential skilled candidates. So I'll let him talk a little bit about what it is he's offering in terms of the matchmaking service.
Yes, thank you. I've already been in touch with quite a few colleges throughout Ontario about this program so that they're aware of what we're trying to do. Over the past 5 years, many of you have known that we've implemented the ITT program in Windsor and the CNC machinist program in the Western and chapter and the Toronto chapter. And in these programs, the CTMA has developed quite a robust screening and assessment process for candidates. This screening helps us find people who have the correct attitude and aptitude that is so crucial to successful careers within our industry. We plan to apply this screening assessment process to all of the participants who register directly with us so that we feel confident that we're bringing forward participants that are ready to start a career for you to interview. This process is all online for the students. It takes about an hour and a half for them to go through our 3 tests, and we even have a psychological evaluation. And it's been pretty successful in the past, so we really wanted to implement that in this new program. We will be working with many of the colleges and universities throughout Ontario, so we should be able to make a good geographical match for both companies and participants. We also realize that a lot of companies have already made or forged relationships with area colleges and are more than happy to move forward with students that they may have already brought forward to you. So if this is the case, that's great as well, and we can work with you by moving those students forward.
Great, so on to the reporting process. So I'm sure you're wondering what kind of paperwork is required. As I said, MentorWorks does the heavy lifting when it comes to the paperwork here, but the expectation is that employers provide new hires with practical education that's required to succeed in the Ontario machine tool die mold sector. So as a result, CTMA is requiring that there are a few different steps in terms of reporting during the funding period or the placement, including a learning plan and a final evaluation. There will be periodic, visits from Rob here to your facility just to make sure that everything is moving forward as planned. And also the expectation is that you would be available for calls or emails or questionnaires from CTMA at any point throughout this process.
So after hiring takes place, I will be coming to your facility to discuss with you a list of outcomes that we know can be achieved by our student over the length of the placement. These technical learning outcomes can be tailored to specific shops and on an individual basis. I will be working with you personally to come up with something that is achievable. I anticipate to have approximately 2 monitoring visits per placement because we do want to see how these students are progressing within their employment with you.
So now the logical next step is, how do we apply? So I know I've talked a little bit about us here, but you can see these 2 URLs at the bottom here. What we would suggest is that you either follow, go to CTMA.com and check out the Career Ready page on their website. It will give you more information. It will also lead you to our contact form, which I mentioned would be the part or the portal for you to start the process to get an application going. If you make it to this portal or this contact form, we at MentorWorks would be in touch within 1 business day to follow up and get the application process started. One thing to keep in mind is that there's a suggested time sort of period of 1 week or 1 business week between when you apply for funding or you submit funding applications and when to expect a signed contribution agreement. So approximately a week, give or take, just to give you an idea of what that turnaround looks like. But yeah, visit ctma.com or mentorworks.ca and you'll find the information you're looking for. The one thing I just realized that we didn't mention throughout this is that as you wrap up the placements, if you are hiring, say for example, a recent graduate, it's completely okay for you to continue to employ that individual. The placement ends as per the funding contribution. However, employment is completely, you can keep that person on. If they're a good fit for your company and they want to stay around, then this is the intention of the program, right, is to help you find and retain young workers that can help your company prosper. So we didn't touch on that. I just wanted to make that very clear. Yeah, that's what we hope the outcome of this program will be. So thank you for joining us today. Did you have anything else there, Rob? Yeah, I just wanted to thank everybody today. I'm kind of new at this webinar thing, so thank you for Sarah for all your help and the MentorWorks team. Thanks for joining us today. We're excited to bring this opportunity forward to you and look forward to starting some new careers within our industry. So let's get moving. Yep, and we'll be in touch with that email and hoping that we hear from several of you about accessing the program. Have a wonderful day and thank you for your time.